Hello, I'm David. Welcome to an episode of Sad 44-year-old man sits alone in a dark room and talks to himself. So, what am I doing here? I'm trying to think of this as something like personal therapy of some sort. I don't really want to pay a psychologist or a counselor to talk to about myself and get feedback. So I'm just sort of sitting here, evaluating my life, thinking about things, and giving myself a few touch points on which to kind of inanely pontificate about. So I would like to say, because I noticed the first video where I've talked like this did get some sort of feedback and interaction, so thanks to anybody that has watched and dropped a note. I appreciate it. I hope you guys are doing well, and thanks for bearing with whatever the hell it is I'm doing here. I wanted to talk about just in general, like this sense of trying to find purpose in life. And in doing that, I think, at least in part, I've used Stoicism as kind of a means of accomplishing that, if I'm accomplishing that, and kind of a modus operandi, or a mode of operating. And all of this stuff to me just kind of feels, talking to a camera about myself and my life just kind of feels awkward. It feels like something like introductions in a new school or class, or like participating in show and tell, but the subject matter is my own inner monologues. And I've always found that kind of awkward and weird, especially starting in school. I had a very difficult time with speaking and public sharing in general. Public speaking and sharing maybe is a better way to say that. And largely in school, that's just how I was. Didn't speak very well, couldn't speak publicly at all very well. Kind of felt shy and awkward. And I'd say probably most of that at least began to burn away and go away later in high school. And into my 20s, I mean, most of it was kind of gone. Awkwardness and shyness and any kind of anxiety, really, I guess. Or at least insofar as it was not a huge issue. So I mostly had gotten over it in my late teens or 20s, I would say. But, I mean, personally, I would still now just call myself an introvert, and certainly leaning in that direction. And in general, growing up and even now, I just find communicating to generally be kind of this weird thing. Trying to convey ideas verbally, even using visual aids or writing thoughts down and trying to communicate with a person is just sort of a weird experience. How do you take the depth of your emotions, your internal monologue, your thoughts, and accurately convey that to somebody else, to an audience? Communication is an imperfect thing, and I'm really imperfect in my execution of my communication of who I am, what I feel, and what I think. And that's kind of something I've been thinking about more in the present and more recently, is this sense that I have that no one really knows me. No one really knows what I think or how I feel about life. Not in totality. and not probably a lot in depth. I mean, different people certainly know different aspects of me, but I don't think any one person I've ever known in my life, from parents to family to a spouse, my children or best friends or anyone, really knows me entirely. Who I am, what do I think, why do I think it, how did I get to these conclusions, how did I get to life philosophy. I've just got these various aspects about myself and my life, which we all do, but nobody really knows all of them. Just these bits and pieces of who we are as people. You know, I liken it to like, you know, I go to work and people at work know me in a certain way, or they know my skills and work product and tasks I've completed and experience and knowledge I have in working. But they don't know, you know, I used to skateboard when I was 10. Most people don't even know that anymore. Or like 10, 11, and 12, I used to skateboard a lot. No, at this point in life, I don't know if anybody knows I used to skateboard. It's not like it's, you know, a big influential thing or it really matters or anything, but it's like there's this artifact nobody knows about. And I don't know if that really conveys what I'm trying to get across or whatever, but, you know, there's some people I've interacted with in life that don't know I've read, you know, a dozen Dragonlance novels or things like that. Just strange little facts or whatever people don't know. And I imagine most people probably just look at me, see my appearance, and assume something about me. I mean, we all do, right? You look at somebody and you make some sort of judgment or whatever. So, I mean, nobody looks at me and goes, oh, that guy's obviously read 12 Dragonlance novels. I don't think that's ever probably happened. But, you know, lately, I've had this sense of dread just in daily life. And I don't know if dread or dreading is the best word, but it's kind of like a sinking feeling inside, or kind of like an anxiety. But I don't believe I have an anxiety problem or I've got big anxiety. I just trying to find a word. I think dread, just dreading. I don't look forward to. I feel a sense of like a physical sense of pain in participating in moving forward with the day. I just don't want to. And that's not like catastrophic to the point of I can't function. It's just like I wake up and I really just don't feel like doing anything. And for some time, it's like a sense of apathy. And that's kind of slowly been building, I think, over the past year and a half. And mostly I'd probably attribute it to work has sucked. And that's because I feel like I've put all this work into, especially over the past 12 or 18 months, all of this work into numerous projects, a couple of dozen projects. And maybe for a little bit more background, I'll just go into, I work in the IT field, information technology. And I work in, I guess what you would commonly refer to as like either system and or network engineering or management or administration or whatever, which mostly boils down to like virtualization environments, VMware, if you're familiar with that. I do a lot of Exchange management, email, Microsoft Exchange. an Active Directory, and things like firewalls and switches and cybersecurity type stuff. At least to some degree, there's kind of a breadth and more depth in some areas than others, like backup and storage and management of all these different IT systems and whatever. So over the past year and a half, I've had at least over a dozen, probably closer to a couple of dozen, of fairly significant work projects. And kind of doing all of this work, getting through all these projects, and at the end of it, there's just not really any payoff. So it feels like kind of like Sisyphus, pushing a boulder up a hill to have it just roll back down the hill, and then you have to push it back up the hill again. There's never any really any payoff. And that's kind of why I've got this sense of dread lately, is I keep pushing this boulder up the hill, it keeps rolling back down, and I push it up again, and it all seems kind of tedious, exhausting, and pointless. And that's maybe a better way to describe why I feel dread. I think dread is maybe an imperfect way to say it, but I feel dread. Like I wake up in the morning and my mornings just bring this sense of dreading trying to get through the day. Everything feels the same and kind of pointless, and I feel stuck, unappreciated, and I feel honestly kind of resentful for whatever. I do all of this work. There's just more work to do, and I feel resentful I don't particularly have the reward I would like, but so I just kind of lay in bed in the morning, and it's not like I lay in bed all day. It's like I wake up at 5:30, 5:45, and I lay in bed for 15 or 20 minutes dreading getting out of bed and going about the day. But how do I deal with this? And for the most part, I deal with it by just doing it anyway, just getting up and going through the day anyway. I just get up, I do what I'm supposed to, I do the next project, and I hope something good happens despite feeling dread. I try to persevere. I try to put one foot in front of the other and just take the next step, and then the next step after that. And hopefully something good happens anyway. And that's kind of been, for me, like one of the big things I've had to deal with in life initially, in earlier years, like teens and 20s. A big hurdle I had to get over is just the idea of perseverance. Things sucking, not being enjoyable, difficult task, difficult day, just persevere, get through the day, and eventually it seems to get better, or there's some kind of payoff. It's just been particularly frustrating from early last year into now, and we're into July now. Particularly frustrating because the payoff still doesn't show up. I mean, year and a half, okay. But it begins to get quite frustrating after that period of time. So, I mean, beyond just getting up and doing it anyway, I try to think positive. And some days, obviously, that goes better than others. The best laid plans of mice and men can still just fall apart for all your effort. And I really do believe, and I think I came to this belief probably at the latest by my mid-20s. I think I really accepted the idea that happiness springs from within, that happiness is really a state of mind. I'm not always happy. I wish I was just always happy. And a lot of the time, I think I am content, or at least some sort of sense of satisfaction. I mean, sometimes, and especially the past week or two, past couple of weeks, probably now at this point, I am very pessimistic because I've got this sense and this feeling that I've just wasted time. Not like my entire life or anything, but especially the past 5 or 6 years. I started at the time what was a new job position at a new company. Now it would have been about 5 years ago. I thought, okay, I will pour myself into this job and I will get a promotion or something good will happen, or the fruits of my labor and work will show those around me my value and I will get more or be promoted or something. Something will happen. Right. And it's just 5 years into it. This is really the longest I've worked at the same place and not received an outright promotion of, hey, here's a more senior title, here's more recognition. This is the longest I've ever gone in my career. And the really unfortunately irritating part about that is this is some of the hardest, best work I've done over a course of time and not received any kind of recognition or anything for it. But whatever. So, like, back to the idea of happiness. For me, I try and focus on, you can think positive thoughts, and happiness doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It can just be like sitting outside on a covered porch, enjoying the experience of seeing a rainy day. That you can choose internally to just be happy, despite being in a bad place, having bad things happen, having awful things happen. Happiness is some sort of active thing that you can do, that you can have control over. Like, you can't put darkness into a room. You have to fill a room with light. The only way you can have darkness is you block out the light. Darkness isn't a thing. It's the absence of a thing. So I try and think about happiness and unhappiness as if it was like the dichotomy between light and dark. Happiness is light. I can fill something with happiness. Unhappiness is when I block out the light. Because otherwise, if happiness is only something external, only something someone else has control over, then that's a significant problem that you don't have control over, and someone else can affect your happiness and fill you with darkness. So, I hope that kind of precursor talk kind of sums up like the idea of voluntary discomfort and like getting into Stoicism, right? Like a concept of Stoicism is placing yourself voluntarily in uncomfortable positions. And through experiencing, traversing, and coming through the other side of uncomfortable situations, that naturally should foster growth in yourself. So that's something I think personally I've found particularly challenging because I would categorize myself as an introverted person and shy. At least certainly in early life, I'm not really extroverted. I don't have to have people interaction. I do find joy in like reading books, reading things, and doing things myself. So what's been difficult for me in life in general, but more so early in life, is just you have to go out in the world, right? And interact with people. And you have to go to a job, you have to work with teammates, you have to be part of a team, you have to accomplish tasks, you have to provide some tangible thing of value, something of value to others in exchange for them giving you a job, paying for your value. So my voluntary discomfort in life has been going out into the world, experiencing it, and kind of struggling and interacting with the world around me and others, and trying to climb the ladder at work and be successful, whatever successful really means. So, voluntary discomfort, even though I dread my days, and more so now today than previously in the past, I just have to get up and go through a day. I've got too many responsibilities. I just can't be lost in my own despair all of the time. There's no time. I just have to get up and voluntarily be uncomfortable. And that's just kind of been the reality of, if you're going to advance in life at all, you have to suffer somehow. You have to suffer through the day. You have to suffer through choices. You have to find a way, in spite of those things, to get through them anyway. All right, so with that said, I kind of want to spend a few minutes talking about, how did I get to this place? Where did any of this really start? What is life? How do I deal with it? What has been my philosophy or like tool set to function and move forward in life? And for me, kind of answering those questions, in early life, I've relied on books. I would use books as an escape or books as a way to learn things. And I've kind of dug through a list of books, and these are three which I ran into early in life that had an impact on me, my outlook on life, and given me some kind of insight to thinking and how I can orient myself in life to better deal with life, if that's a good way to say it. So I'll just start with the first one. The first one is Forging the Dark Sword by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, which is a fantasy novel essentially about a guy named Joram, the guy there with his shirt off, that is born into a world with magic, but he himself does not have magic. And I bring this up because I think this book kind of deals with similar concepts in general to Stoicism. And that was probably an initial book for me that kind of opened my eyes up to that kind of philosophy of you just are either in or put yourself in a difficult situation and you just have to get through it. You have to be stoic, tame and calm your emotions, and try and deal with the world. So I would have ran into the dark sword probably at like 10 or 11 years old. when I read that and started thinking about like Stoicism. The next book, at least in my timeline, that I would have ran into is Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And Thoreau, I think he's fairly popular as like a transcendentalist philosopher. And the book Walden, personally, I think there's a whole lot of good quotes in this. This particular copy also includes his essays on civil disobedience, which themselves are quite interesting. And he kind of gets political, but also kind of questions his own place in society and what his purpose should be. I would probably focus more so on just the work of Walden itself, and he kind of goes on a personal journey of trying to figure out what is the purpose and point in life, and how should one orient oneself. Well, in the final book I would kind of just highlight here in my own personal timeline is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I like the other two books, but personally I think Siddhartha probably had the biggest impact on me. And I'm just going to read the back here, kind of the summary of what the book is about. This classic novel of self-discovery has inspired generations of seekers. With parallels to the enlightenment of the Buddha, Hesse's Siddhartha is the story of a young Brahmin's quest for the ultimate reality. His quest takes him from the extremes of indulgent sensuality to the rigors of asceticism and self-denial. At last, he learns that wisdom cannot be taught. It must come from one's own experience and inner struggle. Steeped in the tenets of both psychoanalysis and Eastern mysticism, Siddhartha presents a strikingly original view of man and culture and the arduous process of self-discovery that leads to reconciliation, harmony, and peace. And at least for me, the reason I really liked the Siddhartha book is it's really a story about a rich guy's kid. Siddhartha is a rich guy's kid. And he purposefully puts himself in some of the worst situations. He goes and lives as if he were poor, lives as if he was homeless, and intentionally restricts himself and puts himself in difficult situations as a means by which to force himself to grow. So all three of the books had I think, a pretty big impact on me and how I try and go about life. And I think at kind of an early age, so, right, like starting with The Dark Sword at like 10 or 11, and Lindley's other books I run into in my early adolescence and then teenage years. So with those books kind of out there, I just wanted to go over some quotes from the book. I'll just do one quote per book. There's a lot of good quotes in Walden. I'm just going to go with one. And the quote I picked is, "The cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run." And kind of revisiting these books, I mean, that quote there really has more of an impact on me looking in retrospect than, reading Walden as like a 14-year-old and trying to wrap my head around stuff like that. It does not have the same impact at 14 that it does at 44. At 44, I really feel like I have paid, exchanged and paid for things at the cost of some amount of my life force. And sometimes I wonder if the cost I have paid has been worth the reward I have received. Some days, sure, and other days I just kind of wonder. So anyway, that's a quote I liked from Walden. I'll give you one from Siddhartha. And this one especially, over the past week or so, this quote really resonates with me from Siddhartha. My real self wanders elsewhere, far away, wanders on and on invisibly, and has nothing to do with my life. I really like that quote because it kind of gives this ethereal kind of quality to it, that like an out-of-body experience, that I am somewhere else, like the real me, who I am fundamentally or emotionally, mentally, the real makeup of me, whoever I am, is somewhere else. And I'm just sort of looking at my physical manifestation, kind of go through the motions of a life that really has nothing to do, at this point, over the past year and a half, let's say, really has nothing to do with who I am. I just, more so in the moment and in the past year, I'm doing all of these things, and I'm just doing them to get through the day, and they're all these things and tasks and work product that really isn't me. So then I'd pick one quote from the Dark Sword trilogy here. I don't know if this was from Forging the Dark Sword or the other two books, but I think that it's all kind of in line with this same kind of vein of thinking. The path to enlightenment is paved with humility and self-reflection. So that just kind of makes me think, like right now, doing all this work and expecting or wanting and expecting, or having this all tied up together, and I've put in all this work and I haven't gotten out of it what I've wanted, and trying to focus on having some more humility, which, believe me, is difficult at the immediate moment. And then just spending time here, especially over the past week or so, reflecting on what I'm feeling, what's been happening to me, what's going on in life, and then, spending time thinking about how did I get here? How did I get down this path, and what tools have I been using to get down this path? And then I would go on a little bit further here, right? So I've kind of talked about these fundamental books for me, and something around that same time period that I ran into was the Matrix movie, the original Matrix movie from the late 90s with Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, which at the time I found to be really, really profound movie. But one of the things that stuck out to me at the time was a quote by Morpheus where he said, there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And I rewatched the movie yesterday, and I heard that quote again, and I thought to myself, the path, I've known the path, this has been my path. Ideas from the Dark Sword, ideas from Walden and Siddhartha, ideas of Stoicism, ideas of transcendentalism, of living as an ascetic like Siddhartha, or trying to, ideas of intentional discomfort for the purpose of self-growth. That's my path. And I've known the path for, at this point, let's say 30 plus years. I've known the path. I've been on the path. I've been walking the path. But especially in the past week or two, walking the path has been a very, very difficult struggle. And that's really what I've been thinking about more so, especially today and yesterday, is I'm really struggling with walking the path that I already know and that I have known. And, I try and use Stoicism as a means to an end, as a way to get me through the day, to help me grow and get ahead. And for better or worse, sometimes having the tools, knowing the tools, operating the tools, sometimes in life, you can do everything right and you can still fail. That's what I've thought about over the past year, the past couple of years, the past 3 or 4 or 5 years. You can be in situations where you do everything right and you still just fail. You can know the path, you can walk the path, and you can still fall down on the path doing everything right, or at least thinking you're doing everything right or whatever. So hopefully that kind of conveys more or better kind of what I've been thinking and stuff. And I noticed in the first video there's been quite a few people, certainly way more than I ever thought would have responded to anything I said here and ramble or talk about. At a certain point I just said I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to talk into a camera, and whatever the hell happens, it happens. And one of my initial thoughts was, how am I going to take possibly an idea or a concept or 3 or 4 bullet points or whatever and find a way to talk 10 or 15 minutes about it? And now, unfortunately, I looked at the first video, skimmed it, let's say, and the damn thing is like in excess of 40 minutes long. So I've kind of ended up with the opposite problem. The opposite problem being I've spoken and rambled for 2.5, 3 times as long about subject matter I thought I wouldn't be able to speak 10 or 15 minutes about. So I have to find some way to curtail my rambling into something a little bit more concise, hopefully in the future. So hopefully, okay, I've touched some bit on the concepts of what am I thinking, what am I doing, what's happening in life, at least generally. How do I deal with it? Stoicism and ideas from, I wouldn't say Walden's really Stoicism per se. It's kind of its own separate thing of individualism, transcendentalism. I don't think transcendentalism is like the best word. It's kind of meaningless unless you really dig into the books. But I think it has some kind of overlap, let's say, with Stoicism. And then Siddhartha with ascetic kind of lifestyle. And I probably haven't done a very good job of talking about it, but for me, if I was going to recommend a book, I would read Siddhartha. It's a short book. Some of it is tedious because there's a lot of terminology, unfamiliar terminology, and part of the book, you probably can't see it well, is just a bunch of definitions. So if you get through the first few pages, I don't know how many pages it is, like 5 or 10 pages of just defining all these Indian terms. Once you get through that, you can kind of read the book and hopefully get the meat and potatoes of what Hess is trying to convey with this life of Siddhartha. Personally, I think it's the best book of the three to read, and it's the shortest and not too bad. Other than that, Walden. Walden is a really spectacular book. I think Thoreau really touched on a lot of amazing ideas, really amazing ideas. It's packed with quotes, and I thought about it a lot over the years, and right now I reflect back onto it, and I think I'm better as a person for having read all three of these books, even the Dark Sword one. Well, the Dark Sword's a little more lower in reading level, let's say, and it's a fantasy novel. So hopefully this kind of conveyed where I've come from, at least in kind of terms of thinking, sort of what I've been going through, and I don't know, a better sense of me and my inner monologue or whatever. Hopefully something interesting in all of this. Other than that, I kind of want to close with going back to when I mentioned dreading and the sense of dread. And someone had mentioned in the comments about nostalgia. Be careful about slipping into nostalgia too much or whatever. It can be poison. I agree. I think there's kind of a weird balancing act you have to do with it's okay to enjoy the past and things, where you've come from, what you've done, good things in life you've enjoyed. Like for me now, it's old video games, things from the 80s and 90s, old music. I like 80s music, like 90s music. The 80s and 90s, particularly today, 2024, looking back now at the 80s and 90s, I kind of didn't like some things about my childhood or early adolescence or teenage years growing up. But looking back in time now, the 80s and 90s looked a lot more fun than current 2020s. I mean, like, what, in the 2020 we fell into the global pandemic or crisis or whatever you want to call it, and spent years everybody locked up at home or whatever. I mean, can you imagine that? A young generation of children. Could you imagine being like 10 or 14 and then the pandemic hits and you spend multiple years at home? I mean, that would have been fundamentally negatively impactful to have gone through something like that. So I really feel kind of grateful, a sense of gratefulness for having grown up in the 80s and 90s, which now seems like a much simpler time. For me, like in the 80s and 90s, I would look back at like my parents or grandparents and think, oh, you guys grew up in like the 50s, the 40s and 50s, and there's all this doo-wop and Motown and these very simplistic and nice and simple, romantic, cutesy kind of teenage songs and all this stuff. And then you get into the 60s and 70s and there's all these protest war songs or whatever. And then the 80s were just kind of like a re-embrace of excess and fun and flashiness. And the 90s were good too, but then you fast forward to the 2020s and it's like, oh my God, so much doom and gloom. Thank God I grew up in the 80s and 90s where childhood was still filled with some kind of fun. But anyway, I would close with this, right? I mentioned dread and dreading, and just that term in general triggered a thought for me. And I wanted to share this video in closing. All right, so this is the capital of conformity, an AI-created video.
You. Yes, you. Do you dread waking up in the morning? Are you feeling helpless in your society? Perhaps even a bit lost? Well, look no further. At the capital, we offer an escape, a new beginning, a lifetime of unending joy. We have an abundance of attractions so captivating, you'll wonder how you ever lived without them. Let's take a look, shall we? Take a ride on the Cosmic Carnival. Let go of decisions and let the carnival choose each thrill for you. Simply sit back and soak in fun. Getting hungry? Make your way to Brightside Bistro, where you can feast until your heart's content. And if that's not enough to satisfy your craving, choose from our exquisite line of automatons, a companion that never strays, never tires, and always obeys. As you traverse our radiant metropolis, bring our latest gizmo, the mood on the go. With the swipe of a thumb, alter your mood instantly and experience any emotion you wish. You can also use it to instantaneously replace your companion if things go south. How convenient. And our most popular attraction, the Dream Machine. Relive your most cherished moments in vivid, extraordinary detail. No need to cling to old photos.
I love you.
Live in the past forever. You might be wondering, what's the cost for such a paradise? Well, dear viewer, some prices aren't paid in gold or silver. We only ask you for one thing: your identity. We'll need the very core of who you are. It's a small price for a lifetime of unending joy, don't you think? And no need to fear crime or violence. We'll always keep an eye on you. For your safety. Welcome back to Spot the Odd One Out. Remember, in the capital, wearing a smile is the norm. However, a few seem to occasionally slip up. No worries. This is your golden opportunity. If you see someone forgetting their grin, report them to us and stand a chance to win fabulous rewards. We'll make sure to turn their frown upside down.
All right, for better or worse, that's what I've got. Take care.